This video is going to be about a technique called displacement mapping. So it's using an image in grayscale to distort something else. So if we jump into After Effects, I've made up a composition, and the first thing I'm going to do is get the type tool, and I'm just going to add in some type. Once I've got the type in, I can come down to this layer, and if I control click on it, I'm going to have an option that says precompose. I'll just call it text. And if I double click on it, like a group, it's going to let me come into this file. Now, for this displacement mapping to work, this text has to be moving or distorting. So I'm going to go S for scale. I'm going to switch off the link and then click the first keyframe with the stopwatch, move it a little bit, and because it's unlinked, I'm just going to move one side. So I'm going to drag it in, expand it all the way out. Do this a few times. And then to get it back to the first point where it started, I'm going to move the playhead, I'm going to click on that first keyframe, copy it, and go Command V or Control V on a PC, and it's going to paste that same frame. Now, if I want to move the left side of the work area, I would hit B. If I want to hit the move the right side, which I do, I'm going to hit N. And it crops it in. If I want to crop the whole animation, this whole timeline, I go Command Shift X, and it cuts it right down to just this frame. So now I've got my distorted type. So going back to the first composition, the next thing I'm going to do is add in a solid. So go Layer, New, Solid. Just going to choose white. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to Effects, and I'm going to bring in something that's called a gradient ramp. Find that, and I can just drop it on there. It gives me my gradient, and now I'll pop that underneath, and with the text I'm going to look up time displacement and the effects. And if I drag that, I can drop it on the text layer. Now what it's going to do here is it's going to say, what do I want it to apply to? And I want it to apply to this solid that I've just made. So I change it there. I can switch off the eye, and I'll hit the space bar. Now at the moment nothing's happening, and it's because this solid also needs to be precomposed. So as soon as I hit precompose, and I'll call this mapping, everything's going to start to take effect. So now when I render it, and with this process I would put it on a quarter. It'll still give you a good representation, but it'll go a lot faster. So you can see the kind of distortion that's happening just from that, essentially that gradient. So if I go back to the mapping, nothing's selected, and I get the pen tool, and I start drawing. At the moment I've got it on a stroke with no fill, and it's 393 pixels, so it's huge. Now this can be a little bit harsh, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the blur. I'm actually going to look up directional blur, and I'm going to drop it on that shape layer, and I'm going to whack this right up to something like 600. I can change the angle a little bit if I want to. And now if we go back to that first composition, you can see the distortion is starting to change now. That line as it runs across it is changing the way that it looks. The other thing as well, if we go back to project, I can bring it in an image that I've got that's grayscale. It's a PNG, but it doesn't really matter. The main fact is that it's a grayscale image. And I'll bring this in and drop it. Gonna scale it out. And with this, I go back to the comp. Even that image is now being used as a grayscale map. And this is kind of like the shoulders running across that character. So there's so much detail in there that it really makes it quite a detailed image. So we can go into that mapping and we can add, let's just use a directional blur again. Pop it on here, let's put it up on 200, back to the comp, and you'll see again that distortion is changing. It's not quite as fine as it was before. So literally anything, as long as it's grayscale, you can use in here. The more that it's softened or blurred, the less kind of jittery it'll look in the other program. So I'm just gonna delete off that image and go back to this. Now when I go back to the comp, I've got this text option here. Now if I click on it, it's going to be, essentially it's the whole boundary. So what we can do is this little star, which means constantly rasterize. If I click on that, it's going to pick up just the text. And as I move it around, you can see that the distortion is changing because the gradient map's not moving. So now I can go Command D, Command D again, Control D on a PC, and now I'll come to the end of these animations, and I'll just go N, let's bring that in, and let's play it. So you can see the kind of distortion that's happening right across the letter forms. Now at this stage, what I can do, and it'll take a lot longer, is I can take this from a quarter, put it on full, and we'll start rendering it to see what happens. It's going to be a much slower process for a start now that it's up on full, but you'll see the difference. It's a little bit finer, but to have it on a quarter still gives you a really, really good representation of how the final thing's gonna look. And let's put it back on a quarter, and we'll try one more thing. I'll just get rid of a couple of these text layers. I'm going to go into the text, and with this we've got the scale changing, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in Shift P for position, and I'm going to try and change the position and see how that starts to affect it as well. Some of these scale options, let's put it really start to change those. Oh, that's the position, so the scale here, I'll link it back up. make it a lot bigger. And again, we'll move the position around. If we go back to the comp, let's see the sort of distortion that we're starting to get now. Okay, I've pushed it too far off the screen, so I'm just going to drag it back up a bit, and let's go from here. So you can really start to warp and manipulate the text using any image you want, as long as it's grayscale. Okay, so we'll stop it there.